my name is Lina. I'm a college advisor here with the College Advising Corps. And today I'm going to be sharing with you a short presentation on how to apply to college as an undocumented student. So if you are part of our program in any way, if you have a College Corps advisor at your high school, please use them as a resource. This is not an extensive presentation. So definitely if you have more questions, reach out to those in your life that might have more information on this. So let's get started. So first of all, it's important to know your immigration status. So whether a student has DACA, any sort of protective status, or if they don't have any sort of legalized immigration status. It's important to know that because that will sort of limit the opportunities in the colleges that you can apply to. So there are also various visa types. So it's important to know if you are on a dependent visa, you might not be able to access federal financial aid. If your visa is expiring soon, will you be able to renew it? So think about what kind of visas you have and then seeing if they qualify for in-state tuition or even any sort of financial aid. If you are an asylum seeker or if you have refugee status, that might change things. So if you have your refugee status pending and you're currently applying for asylum, you have access to different sorts of financial aid than if you already have refugee status. So that's something to keep in mind. Clarity on your status is really important with maximizing the opportunities that will be available for you. So if you're not sure, you're not clear on your status, especially if you haven't started applying for school yet, now is a good time to figure that out. It's also important for you to keep track on the different federal and state policies. On the federal level, undocumented students are not eligible to fill out the FAFSA, so they're not eligible to apply for financial aid. So that's important to keep in mind. But on a state level, different financial aid policies vary from state to state. So it's also important to figure out what the policies are on your specific state. There are some states that give financial aid to undocumented students, and there are states that restrict undocumented students from applying to public institutions. So it's important to know where your state falls in those policies. And then if you have any other immigration status like TPS, you may qualify for financial aid or in-state tuition, but again, that will vary from state to state. So it's important to know the difference. So with your college list, it's important that you consider private colleges, both in-state and out-of-state. Like I mentioned before, students, undocumented students do not qualify for in-state tuition or for federal aid in a lot of states. So it's important to have some private colleges in the mix of the college list because private colleges have institutional funds that they can use to provide with financial aid. Because they set their own policies, they can be more flexible in providing aid to undocumented students. So that's something to keep in mind. You might also want to consider colleges where you overmatch. So that means maybe your GPA is a little bit higher than the average GPA of the students there, because then that way you will be highly qualified for merit scholarships, which are usually based on grades. So again, not being super picky on the college list will be important to make sure that on the back end, you are giving yourself a lot of options and a lot of opportunities. Also consider colleges where they have shown a commitment to undocumented students through their policies and support systems. So do they offer legal services? Do they offer assistance with DACA renewal fees? Have they said that this is a sanctuary campus, or have they put in place policies to make you feel safe and heard on campus? That will also become important later on. Also, it's important to consider the location. So how will you get there, and do you have support nearby? Are there any relevant state or local policies? So this This is particularly important for students without DACA protection that may not have access to getting a driver's license or a state ID, because you do need those things in order to travel on a plane. So if you're considering out-of-state colleges, it's also important to think about the logistics of how you will get there as a student. So here is a list that has some example on undocu-friendly colleges and universities. This is not an extensive list, so there are way more colleges and universities that provide financial aid, but this is just some example to get you guys started. You can also Google the name of the college plus undocumented to see if any of their policies show up. So some things to keep in mind when doing your research. So some application advice. It's important that you find a trusted ally at your school, or if you are using one of our online resources, that you find a person that has information that you can trust so that you can talk about what your options are. So if there's a teacher, there's a counselor, anyone at the school that you feel you can really ask more in-depth questions, that will be key in your application process. Also, be honest when completing any applications related to citizenship. Do not list that you're a US citizen when applying to schools if that doesn't apply to you, because that will mess with your financial aid later on. Also, be prepared to receive messages meant for international students. Admissions offices usually send automated messages to non-citizens, so you may receive some information that doesn't really apply to you. Make sure you're reading your emails, that you're staying on track with all your application stuff, because usually also if universities need any more information from you, they will contact you via email. So that's important to keep in mind. Remember, when sharing your status with teacher recommenders, or if you're having an interview for a school, or if you're writing your essay about how being undocumented has been a challenge for you, that is your choice. You don't have to talk about it, because there are so many other things that make you a person and a qualified applicant, and a student who's excited to learn. So if you want to talk about your status and you feel empowered in sharing that, then you should, but you should never feel pressured to share your status. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, applications are protected by FERPA, so you don't have to worry about anyone else at the university figuring out your status if that's something that you're trying to keep on the down low. Again, this is your business, and how you want to share it is really up to you. So for financial aid applications, students that do not have a Social Security number cannot fill out the FAFSA. So if you do have a Social Security number, maybe you fell out of status, but you had legal status at some point, you might have a Social Security number, you can fill out the FAFSA, but we recommend that you don't fill it out without asking first if the institutions that you're applying to require that from you if you do have a Social Security number. So those are some things to keep in mind. The CSS profile is used by many colleges, especially private colleges, and that one can be used regardless of citizenship. So maybe you're applying to a school where you cannot fill out the FAFSA, but you can fill out the CSS. That's something to keep in mind. Another note on the FAFSA is if you are a US citizen, but your parents are undocumented, you can still fill out the FAFSA. And there are more resources online on how to do that, but that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes US citizens think that they cannot fill out the FAFSA if their family is undocumented, but there are ways to do that. So again, if you do not have a Social Security number, don't fill it out. If you do have a Social Security number, you can fill it out. Some schools also have institutional aid forms that are specific to them. So maybe the schools give out their own financial aid, but they do not use the CSS profile. They will have different forms for you to fill out to prove your family income, to see how much aid you qualify for if you are not able to fill out the FAFSA. So a few resources for undocumented students: My Undocumented Life, Immigrants Rising, So much potential, scholarships A to Z, and our College Advising Corps website as well has some resources for undocumented students. So there are also large competitive scholarships that usually give out full rides that you qualify for as an undocumented student. So Golden Dollar Scholars is specifically for DACA and undocumented students. So they are very understanding of your situation because they exist specifically for students who do not have legal status. The Jack and Cook Foundation is also open to first years or transfer. The Dream.us Opportunity Scholarship is also specifically for undocumented and documented students. And then QuestBridge Scholarship is also open to students regardless of status. So that is the end of the presentation. If you have any more questions, again, if you have a College Advising Corps advisor at your high school, or if you have access to our virtual resources, please feel free to ask more questions and check out the rest of our YouTube videos for more information.